The noise started at the third hour past midnight. Not a loud noise, not a crash or a thump that would make a person sit up with a racing heart. It was smaller than that. A soft scraping sound, like stone dragging slowly across stone. Then a pause. Then it came again. Dani Solano lay still in her bed and listened. She had lived on the colony's outer edge long enough to know the sounds of the local wildlife. The six-legged grass runners that moved in packs at night. The wind that came off the ridge and hit the workshop's corrugated roof in a way that sounded almost like breathing. She knew all of those. This was not any of those. She got up quietly, pulled on her boots without lacing them, and picked up the heavy wrench from her bedside table. Not because she was brave, because the wrench was there, and it was familiar, and it made her feel slightly less foolish walking toward an unknown sound in the dark. The scraping was coming from the back of the house. She moved through the kitchen, staying low, not turning the lights on. The back window looked out onto the small flat stretch of ground behind the workshop, then the tree line, maybe 40 meters away. There was no moon worth mentioning, just the faint orange glow of the colony's light banks reflecting off the low clouds. She looked out the window. For shapes were pressed against the glass. Dani did not scream. She stepped back hard enough to hit the kitchen counter with her hip, and then she stood very still and breathed through her nose and looked at the four shapes again. Small. They were small, each one roughly the size of a large dog, maybe a little bigger. Scaled, winged in a folded, compressed sort of way. Eyes that caught the distant colony light and gave back something bright and golden. Four faces, for pairs of eyes, all pointed directly at her. She had never seen a Dracari hatchling before. Nobody on the colony's outer ring had, as far as she knew. The adults, yes, she had seen those from a distance. Large, scaled, deeply uninterested in human contact. But these were not adults. These were clearly children. They had the same round-headed, large-eyed, slightly clumsy look that young things had across species. One of them had a smear of dirt across its snout. They stared at her. She stared at them. Then the smallest one, the one with the golden amber scales, sneezed so hard its whole body rocked backward. It bumped into the one behind it, which bumped into the next, and all four of them briefly became a small pile of wings and tails. Dani put down the wrench. She stood in her kitchen for a long moment, having a private argument with herself. One side of the argument had several very reasonable points about colony regulations, species contact protocols, and why she should go back to bed. The other side of the argument looked at the way the smallest one was shivering. She opened the back door. She did not step out. She just opened it and stood in the doorway and waited. There was a long pause. Then the boldest one, blue-green scales, nose slightly raised like it was making a decision, walked in past her. The others followed. The timid one, deep green and small, pressed itself flat to the wall just inside the doorframe and looked at everything with enormous eyes. The smallest one tripped over the door's threshold and landed on the kitchen floor and seemed perfectly fine about it. Dani closed the door behind them. She went to the heating vent on the far kitchen wall and turned it up. They moved toward it immediately, which told her everything she needed to know about why they had come. She found leftover stew in the pot on the stove, 3 days old but still sealed, and she put it in a wide flat pan on the floor because she had no idea what else to do. They ate all of it. Every bit. The bold one ate quickly. The curious one paused to examine the pan itself before eating. The timid one waited until the others were done and then finished what was left. The smallest one got stew on its face and then sneezed again. Dani sat on the floor of her kitchen with her back against the cabinet and watched them settle near the vent. She did not sleep, but she stayed quiet. Somewhere around the 5th hour, she dozed briefly against the cabinet door. When she woke, just before dawn, they were gone. The back door was undamaged. There were 4 sets of small claw prints on the kitchen floor, plus a patch of warmth near the vent that had not yet faded. She stood in the kitchen and looked at all of this for a while. Then she went and turned the heating vent back up. Not all the way, just enough that if something cold and small came back the next night, it would have somewhere warm to go. She did not file a report. She did not contact the garrison. She made herself a cup of strong coffee, went into the workshop, and started her day. Outside, in the trees, nothing moved. But something watched. Rivara always counted them before sleep. It was a habit she had started the night her mate did not come home. Before that, she had trusted the world a little more. After, she did not. So every night, when the four of them were finally still enough to stay in one place, she counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then she tucked her wings around them and closed her eyes. That night, she counted and found 4 small sleeping shapes, which should have been a comfort. But something about the way they were sleeping was wrong. They were too still, too full. There was none of the usual shifting and grumbling and elbowing that happened when 4 hatchlings were actually settling. These 4 looked like they had already been comfortable somewhere else and had simply moved the sleep from one location to another. She looked at them more carefully. They were clean, not their usual end-of-day dirty, which she had gotten used to, actually clean or close to it. And the 2 youngest smelled faintly of something she did not immediately recognize. Something warm, something cooked. Rivara was still for a long moment. Then she put her nose very close to the eldest, the blue-green one, and breathed in. The eldest opened one eye. "I am going to ask you something," Rivara said, very quietly, "and you are going to tell me the truth." The eldest closed the eye. Solon. Both eyes opened. He looked at her the way he always did when he had already done the thing and was now calculating whether the truth or a partial truth would be more useful. Rivara had raised him. She knew that look in her sleep. "We were cold," he said. "You are always cold. Where did you go?" He held out for almost 4 full seconds, which was longer than she expected. Then he told her everything. The lit window at the edge of the colony. The way the warmth had pressed against the glass from inside. The door that opened. The human. The stew. The heating vent. By the time he finished, Rivara was no longer sitting. She was standing, wings slightly raised without her meaning to raise them. "You went inside a human's home," she said. "She left the door open." "That is not." Rivara stopped. Breathed. Started again. "That does not make it a safe place. You do not know what she wanted from you." She sat on the floor. The second one said. Mary. She had been pretending to sleep. Her silver pale scales were very poor at looking innocent. She sat on the floor, and she talked quietly, and she did not touch any of us. She talked. We did not understand most of it, but her voice was slow, like she was trying not to scare Bren. The third one, the deep green one, burrowed his face under Tula's wing and said nothing, which meant it was true. Rivara looked at all 4 of them. Then she looked at the small metal button Miri was still clutching in her front claws, a human-made thing, machine-polished, with a small stamped pattern on its face. She took it from Miri gently and set it aside. "You will not go back," she said. None of them argued. They were very good at not arguing in the moment and then doing the thing anyway, which she also knew, but she could not fight what had not happened yet. Her sister Sari was leaning against a rock at the far edge of the den and had been the whole time. She had the expression of someone who had been working very hard not to laugh. "This is not amusing," Rivara said. "No," Sari agreed. "It is genuinely alarming that 4 hatchlings snuck across a colony boundary and came home fed and clean and completely unharmed." She paused. "Extremely not amusing." Rivara told her to go to sleep. She did not sleep herself. She sat at the den's entrance and looked toward the colony lights. There was one light at the far edge, just barely visible through the trees. A single lit window. It stayed lit later than the others. After a while she moved toward the tree line. She was not going close. She just wanted to see better. She told herself this. She watched from the edge of the first trees as the humans stepped out the back of the small structure, looked at the clear sky for a moment, then bent down and set something on the back step. Something in a shallow bowl. Something wrapped in cloth next to it. Then the human went back inside. Rivara stayed at the tree line for a long time after the back door closed. Longer than made sense. She was trying to understand what kind of trap left food and warmth at the door and then went to bed. She could not fit it into any category she had. She counted her young again, all 4 of them visible through the den's opening, all breathing, all safe. Then she sat down at the tree line and watched the single lit window until it finally went dark. Danny spent most of the next day in the colony's public archive. She told herself she was looking up supply routes. She told herself this for about 10 minutes, and then she typed Drackery hatchling diet into the search bar and stopped pretending. The xenobiology files were thin. Most of the data on the Drackery came from formal contact records, adults, diplomatic situations, territorial boundary negotiations. There was very little on hatchlings because nobody had gotten close enough to hatchlings to observe them for any significant length of time. What she found was basic. high-protein diet, preference for warm environments, developing heat regulation that would not fully mature for several seasons. She read that last part twice. Their scales were still growing in. They were not able to hold their own body heat yet, not the way adults could. A cold night at the colony's edge, for a grown Dracary, was nothing. For young ones, it was a real problem. She went back to the workshop and started pulling a storage crate apart. The geological survey equipment had been sitting in the back corner of her workshop for 2 years. She had taken it in from a mining team that folded, intending to resell it, and then never gotten around to it. The heat stones inside were still good, dense, mineral-based. They held warmth for hours once charged. She had 3 of them. She charged all 3 and set them into the low corner of her kitchen, behind the main shelving unit, where the floor space was wide and flat and sheltered on 2 sides. She put a salvaged cargo mat down first, then the stones on top. Then she thought about it for another minute and added a second mat folded over the first, because the stones alone would be hard to sleep on. Then she stood back and looked at what she had made and felt briefly ridiculous. Then she looked up what Dracary hatchlings could eat that was not leftover stew, because that had been an accident and she wanted to do better. She found a general xenobiology reference that listed proteins by species family. She had dried fish from her last colony supply run. She had eggs. She had a block of dense grain paste that she used for herself on long workshop days. She portioned all of it into a flat container and left it near the heat stones. She left the back door unlatched at dusk. They came at the second hour past dark, all 4 of them, and this time they came faster, like the route was already familiar. The bold one, Danny, had started thinking of him as Solon in her head, though she had no idea if that was right. Went directly to the heat stones and lowered himself onto the mat with the satisfaction of something that had already done a calculation and confirmed it. The curious silver one found the food. She examined every piece individually before eating anything. The timid green one ate from the far side of the container, keeping its body angled so it could see the room at all times. The smallest one ate quickly and then walked directly up to Danny's knee, looked up at her, and sneezed. Danny did not move. The timid one, she had started thinking of him as Bren, watched. Then, very slowly, he walked across the kitchen floor and pressed the flat of his snout against the back of Danny's hand. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then he pulled back and returned to the heat stones. Danny sat with her hand exactly where it was for a while after. She started talking. It was not a decision exactly. It was more that the silence felt too pointed, and she was not good at pointed silence. She talked about the broken sensor calibrator she had been fixing all day. She talked about the supply delivery that was 2 days late. She talked about the fact that she missed actual rain, the kind that smelled like wet soil, because the colony's weather systems were still too controlled and it never rained the right way. They listened with more focus than most humans she knew. She did not notice the garrison alert on her workshop scanner until much later that night, after the dragonlings had gone. She replayed it while she cleaned up. A patrol had reported unidentified Dracary movement near the colony's eastern perimeter. The report was flagged routine but forwarded to Colonel Aldrich's attention. She stood holding the scanner for a moment. Aldrich was not a person who filed things away without following up. She knew him by reputation from her medic years, organized, thorough, not prone to letting flagged things sit. He would pull sensors. He might add coverage. She turned the scanner off and washed the food container out and set it aside to use again tomorrow. Outside, closer than the night before, Rivara stood at the edge of the tree line and looked at the workshop window. She was looking at the light inside, and at the shape of the human woman moving around in it, and at the particular quality of the warm glow that came through the back window over the heat stones that she had charged herself and set on mats on the floor. Nobody had done that for Rivara's young. Not one person in her own kin group had done anything close to that since her mate's death. They had offered words. Rivara did not know what to do with words right now. She knew what to do with heat stones on mats. She stood in the dark for a long time. Then, slowly, she moved 2 full steps out of the tree line. Not into the light, but out of the trees. Danny stepped outside for air. It was a habit she had on restless nights. Not a long walk, just a few minutes standing behind the workshop under the open sky, letting the night cool her face. The colony's outer edge was quiet this time of night. No ground traffic, no voices. Just the faint sound of the tree line settling, the distant hum of the main colony power grid, and the particular silence that meant nothing was wrong. She pulled the door to behind her, turned around, and stopped. There was a dragon standing 10 meters from her back step. Not a hatchling. An adult Dracari female, gold-scaled, wings folded tight against her body. Amber eyes fixed on Danny with an expression that had several things in it, and none of them were friendly. She was not as large as the adults Danny had seen in the boundary reference files, but she was large enough. Large the way a problem is large when it has been coming toward you for a while and has finally arrived. Danny's body wanted to run. She gave it a moment to want that, and then she did not run. Instead, she took a breath, turned slightly sideways so she was not squaring up, and then she sat down on her back step. She put both hands in her lap. She did not reach for the scanner on her belt. She did not look at the door. She waited. The dragon watched her sit down. Something shifted in those amber eyes, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. Like an expectation had not been met, and a new one was being formed. Slowly, in trade pidgin, the functional contact language that both species had been using at diplomatic levels for decades, clipped and imprecise, but workable, the dragon spoke. Your purpose? With my young. The trade pidgin flattened a lot out. Danny could not hear tone clearly, but she understood the shape of the question. They were cold, Danny said. She said it in trade pidgin, or her version of it, which she had taught herself from a colony language file 3 years ago for reasons she had never needed until now. The words were probably not perfectly shaped. The meaning came through. Another silence. You fed them, the dragon said. Yes. You built warmth for them. Danny thought about how to explain heat stones and salvage survey equipment and an old cargo mat. I put together what I had, she said. The dragon looked at the back door of the workshop, then at Danny, then at the ground between them, which was neutral space, which both of them were apparently choosing to keep that way. I am Rivara, the dragon said. Because it was trade pidgin, there was nothing else around the name. No title, no clan marker. Just the name, offered. Danny said the same way. A long pause. Why not report? Rivara asked. Her trade pidgin was better than Danny's. Sharp, clean. Dracari young, near the colony. Regulations require reporting. Danny looked at the ground for a moment. Because then someone with a weapon would have come instead of me. That landed somewhere. She could see it land. Rivara did not answer immediately, and when she did, it was not about that. Their father is gone, she said. The trade pidgin word she used was the one that meant lost in a specific way. Permanently, specifically. Not wandering. Gone. Danny did not say she was sorry. She had been a medic long enough to know that sorry, said quickly, meant nothing. Instead, she sat with it for a moment in the way that meant she had heard it. I was a medic, she said. Before this. For the colony field units. She tried to find the trade pidgin for what came next, and could only partially. I kept things alive. That was my work. Things that had no good reason to survive. I kept them alive anyway. Rivara looked at her for a long time after that. Then the back door of the workshop opened from the inside, which meant that 4 hatchlings had worked out the handle and decided the conversation had been going on long enough without them. Solon led the way out at a confident walk. Miri followed with a metal bolt she had found somewhere in the kitchen, turning it in her front claws. Bryn pressed himself against the doorframe and then came out anyway. Tula came through last, tripped over the door's lip for the 3rd time in 4 days, and landed on the step, looked around, and decided she was fine. Then all 4 of them walked past Danny and pushed against Rivara's legs, wings, and lower body with the full physical certainty of children who have been somewhere they should not have and are now using affection as a shield against consequences. Tula had a small knitted cap sitting sideways on her head. Danny had no idea where it had come from. She had not seen it in the kitchen. Rivara looked down at her young, then up at Danny, then down again at the cap. Danny said, very carefully, I did not give her that. I know, Rivara said. She sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with tonight. Danny moved over on the step, not far, just slightly. Making space she had not been using. She did not say anything to go with it. Rivara stood for a moment. Then she lowered herself to the ground. Not on the step, not that close, but facing the same direction. 3 meters. Close enough to be in the same quiet. They sat there. 2 females, 1 human and 1 Dracari, on a cold night at the colony's outer edge. The hatchlings settled between them. Nobody said anything for a long time, and it was not the bad kind of silence. The alert came through at the 4th hour past midnight. Danny heard it from inside the workshop. Her scanner was still on her belt from earlier, and the garrison frequency carried. A ground-level sensor at the colony's eastern perimeter had registered a large Dracari life form, stationary, inside the extended coverage zone that Aldrich had apparently authorized faster than she had expected. The report classified it as a possible territorial incursion. Response team authorized. She had maybe 15 minutes, possibly less. She stepped out the back door fast. Rivara was still there, sitting in the same position, 3 meters back from the step. The 4 hatchlings were drowsing in a loose pile. The night was cold and very still. "There is a military team coming," Danny said in trade pidgin, keeping her voice flat, and even because panic was not useful right now. "Soldiers. They have a sensor reading. They think you are a scout." Rivara was on her feet before the sentence finished. Wings half raised. The hatchling stirred at the sudden movement, Bren coming awake with a small, frightened sound. "Go," Rivara said. Not to Danny. To her young. She was pointing them toward the tree line. "Wait," Danny said. Rivara looked at her. "If you run, the sensors follow you. They track your direction. They will log it as confirmation of a scout pattern. It becomes a report. That report goes to people above Aldrich. That is harder to undo than this." She kept her voice level. "I need you to trust me for 10 minutes. Something moved across Rivara's face. Danny had no way to read it perfectly, but the wings lowered slightly. "What do you need?" Rivara asked. "Stay still. Stay where you are. Do not move toward the colony, and do not move into the trees." "Can you do that?" A pause that felt very long. "Yes." Danny went inside, picked up the colony comm unit from the workshop shelf, and opened the garrison frequency. "This is Danny Solano, colony registration 7714, Outer Ring Workshop Sector. I am currently on site conducting an unscheduled welfare check on juvenile Dracari who have been approaching the colony boundary over the past several nights." She paused, kept her voice steady. "The adult present is the mother. She arrived to collect her young. The situation is entirely non-hostile. I am flagging this now to prevent a misclassification response." She used her old medic authority codes after that, the ones that had been assigned to her when she worked colony field medical. They had technically lapsed when she stopped working for the colony full-time, but they were still in the system, and she was counting on the fact that a garrison duty officer at the 4th hour past midnight was not going to stop and verify the expiration date before a response team reached the perimeter. The duty officer asked her to confirm her location and the number of Dracari on site. She confirmed both, clearly and calmly. Then she went back outside and sat on the step and waited. Rivara looked at her. "What did you do?" "I filed a welfare report." She paused. "My version of one. Is that true? What you told them?" "Mostly. The welfare part is true. The authorization part is a stretch." Rivara was quiet for a moment. "You may be punished. Probably reprimanded." Danny rubbed her face. "It's fine." 12 minutes later, a ground vehicle came around the side of the workshop. Standard garrison configuration, 2 soldiers up front, and Colonel Aldrich himself in the back, which told Danny she had correctly estimated how fast he would move on a flagged report. He stepped out and looked at the scene in front of him. For hatchlings in a drowsy pile on a cargo mat near a heating vent visible through an open door. One large adult Dracari female sitting 3 meters from the back step, wings folded, perfectly still. One human woman sitting on the step with her hands in her lap, looking back at him. Aldrich was a large, gray-haired man with a face that had made a lot of decisions over the years and looked like it. He stood and took in the scene for a long moment without speaking. Then he looked at Tula, who was awake and wearing a small knitted cap at a significant angle. He looked back at Danny. "Welfare check," he said. "Yes, sir." "With expired medical codes." Danny said nothing. Aldrich looked at Rivara. Rivara looked back at him with amber eyes that gave nothing away and everything away simultaneously. He looked at the heat mat, the food container, the heat stones visible through the doorway, the cargo mat, worn soft from being used repeatedly. He was a military man. He was also not stupid. There was nothing here that fit the shape of an incursion. There was nothing here that fit the shape of anything, actually, except something that had been going on for several nights already and was not currently hurting anyone. "Stand down," he said to the soldiers without turning. Then, to Danny, "My office. Tomorrow. Early." "Yes, sir." He got back in the vehicle. They left. The sound of the engine faded into the tree line. The hatchlings resettled. Bryn made a small sound and tucked his nose under his front leg. Rivara turned and looked at Danny for a long moment. "You lied for us," she said. "I stretched the truth for a welfare check. It is different." "Yeah," Danny said. "But it worked." She looked up at the sky. The night was still cold, still quiet. In the workshop, the heating vent hummed softly. On the mat, Tula sneezed in her sleep, and the cap slid off entirely. Nobody moved to fix it. They just sat there together in the quiet and let it be. 3 months later, the wall of the workshop had a new addition. It was not a large room. A single stone alcove, tucked against the workshop's eastern wall where the wind came in the least. Low ceiling, wide floor, 3 sides of closely fitted stone with a 4th side open and facing the workshop's back interior. The stones were Drakkari work. That was obvious to anyone who looked. The colony's human builders used poured composite and modular panels. The Drakkari cut and fitted stone the way some people wrote, carefully, with meaning in the spacing, each piece considered against the last. Rivara had brought 3 of her kin group over 2 weekends to build it. They had not said much to Danny during the process, but they had worked until it was done, and when it was done the eldest of them had placed a flat palm on the outside stone and said something in the Drakkari language that Rivara translated later, privately, as something close to, "This is a shelter. It is meant to be used." The heat stones were already inside. Danny had been called into Aldrich's office the morning after the sensor incident, as promised. She had gone expecting a formal reprimand, possibly a fine, maybe a restriction on her outer ring operating license. What she had not expected was Aldrich closing the door, sitting down across from her, and saying, "I have spent 3 years watching every formal diplomatic contact with the Drakkari stall in the first meeting. Tell me what you actually did." She told him, plainly, without making it bigger than it was. She had let cold hatchlings inside. She had fed them. She had charged some old heat stones. Aldrich had listened with the expression of a man watching something he did not fully understand but recognized the shape of. Then he had offered her a position, unofficial, no rank, minimal pay, as the colony's first Drakkari contact liaison. Not a diplomat, not a soldier, just a person the Drakkari had apparently decided they were willing to speak to. She accepted, mostly because refusing seemed like it would just make things more complicated. Sari was the one who told Danny what the alcove meant, in the social sense. Not the building, the decision behind it. Among the Drakkari, she explained, building shelter for another was a kin declaration. It was not done lightly. It could not be undone once done. The word for what Danny was now, inside that framework, did not translate cleanly into the colony's common language. The closest Sari could manage in trade pidgin was something like hearth extended, a person counted among the protected. Danny said she did not need the word to translate. She understood what it meant. Sari thought about this for a moment, then said that Rivara had cried for quite a long time when she decided to build it, which Rivara would deny if asked. Danny said she would never ask. Miri brought the button back on a clear afternoon in the 6th week. She held it out in both front claws and waited for Danny to take it. It had been polished to a mirror finish. Whatever collection process Miri had used, it had worked. Danny looked at the button for a moment. Then she held out her hand. Miri put it in her palm with the focus of someone completing a formal transaction, then immediately went back to cataloging the workshop shelving system, which she had apparently organized into a classification system based on criteria that Danny had not been consulted on and could not fully decode. Bryn had stopped being afraid of the workshop tools. He still startled sometimes, at loud sounds and sudden movements. But he had developed a focused, methodical interest in anything mechanical, and he had taken to following Danny on her workshop rounds in the way that small things follow people who do not make sudden moves and do not push them away. She had given him a broken rotary driver to take apart. He had taken it apart in 40 minutes and then reassembled it, mostly correctly, and brought it back to her. She was teaching him how a wrench worked now. It was going slowly. He kept stopping to think. On a warm evening near the end of the 3rd month, Rivara sat beside Danny on the back step, beside, not 3 meters away, and asked the question she had been not asking since the beginning. "Why?" she said. The real reason. Not the answer you give Aldrich. Danny was quiet for a moment. She looked at the alcove, at the 4 hatchlings visible through the back door, Solon and Miri in an argument over a smooth stone, Bryn methodically working at the rotary driver, Tula asleep in the corner with her nose tucked under her tail. I don't have a better answer than the one I gave you that first night, she said finally. They were cold. I had a heater. That was all. Rivara looked at her. Among my people, there would be ceremony. A reason given. A declaration made to the kin group. Among mine too, usually. Danny turned the polished button over in her fingers. We also have people who do it before anyone makes it official. Before it becomes a ceremony. Before someone decides it is worth celebrating. She paused. Those people are not usually considered special. They just did not look away. Rivara was quiet for a while after that. Then, in the language she did not usually use with Danny, she said something short and low and careful. Danny did not know all the words. She caught enough. Something like, you are counted. The night settled around the back of the workshop. In the alcove, the heat stones glowed softly. Through the open doorway, 4 small-scaled shapes moved in the warm light, alive, fed, safe, stubborn, and very much at home. Danny sat with her shoulder almost touching Rivara's side. Neither of them said anything more. They did not need to.